as I say, this is actually just an introduction. So we are having a few technical difficulties, so please bear with us if we, there we go. So if you could, that's it. So what's FIDIC? It's the International Federation of Consulting Engineers.
Andy, is that all you can see? Have we lost him?
Yeah, he muted
He's
himself.
muted.
No, they can't hear us. He's muted.
Andy, you're muted, apparently.
It's looking good from.
That's it. Okay, you're off mute now.
Right. I don't
Okay.
think I was muted previously, so apologies.
It looked like it.
Right, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, right. Okay, so let's start again. The International Federation of Consulting Engineers is actually a federation of member associations. Its goals were many years ago, back to the beginning of the last century, was to promote quality, integrity and sustainability in the construction industry. It was founded in 1913, just before the First World War, and the headquarters are in Geneva. If you could flip over there, Suzanne. And there, just to give you an indication, you know, we go right from west of Australia, New Zealand, right to Canada, and everywhere in between. And you can actually see there the predominance of the member organisations are centralised around the Mediterranean and Europe, but we've got through Africa, South America and Asia. And I guess today it is the international form of contract for use, and particularly in those countries, unlike say the UK, and I hesitate to use the word more developed countries, that have developed over the years their own internal national forms of contracts, such as the NEC, the JCT, the ICE, etc. So if we are an emerging country and you don't have those things in place, a robust form of contract, well, the go-to stop for many years now is to adopt the FIDIC form of contracts. Thanks, Suzanne. Just to give you an idea, one of the main thing is that everybody knows FIDIC for is its works contracts and agreements. So we look at some of the different forms of contract and what sort of projects they would be most suitable, and how you would make a choice between, let's say, a red book and a gold book or a silver book. Okay. But one thing a lot of people don't realise is it just doesn't stop with works contracts. We've got client consultancy agreements, sub-consultancy agreements, consultancy JV agreements, and another one that my menu bar is obscuring.
Client representative.
Yeah, client representative agree. This truly is teamwork, isn't it? Okay. They also publish quite a lot of business practice guides and manuals. So, for example, as well as getting the contracts themselves, you can get your instruction manual, if you like. So there are various guides to the contracts. There are guidelines to for when you are preparing the exact conditions, say the particular conditions, and again the guidelines as to choosing the most suitable form of contract for your project. Management procedures, procurement, and rather than me going through all the detail, they do have a very good bookshop, and all you need to do is log on to the FIDIC website to find all the different publications that they do. And I suggest, many people don't realize that this sort of additional help is available, so I suggest that you have a look there and have a look for any publications that might help you with your job. Okay. Let's just have a look at some of the most popular ones, and the number one form of contract really is known as the Red Book. They are known by the colours of the covers. It's also known as the rainbow suite of contracts. But the Red Book basically is the more traditional form of contracting. So it's for building or engineering works designed by the employer, or more usually his design consultant. So the contractor's obligations under a Red Book is to construct the work in accordance with the design provided by the employer, although it may include some elements to be designed by the contractor. So if you've got something specialist, and I always refer to facades as a good example of this. The designer would show the contractor what the facades must look like in terms of spacing of mullions and transoms, the colour of the glass, the thermal characteristics of the facade, but the actual details would need to be designed by the specialist facade contractor, such as the profile of the extrusions, the fixings, the weatherproofing, etc., etc. It is a remeasurable contract. So what we tender on a bill of estimated quantities, and then the contractor is paid for the works actually as constructed at the end through a remeasurement. I don't need to tell quantity surveyors all about that, I don't think. An engineer is responsible for administering the contract on behalf of on behalf of both parties, but the engineer, of course, is appointed by the employer. And there's a very balanced risk allocation in this contract, and what it does, FIDIC seeks to apportion the risks based on who is better to handle the risk, who is better to pay for the risk, depending on the type of risk. So it is very, very balanced. The contractor will accept certain risks, although that's not mentioned in the contract, but the employer will be set out to, if this happens and it's something that you're responsible for, Mr. Employer, you need to award an extension of time if warranted, or pay additional money if warranted. And also things, natural events or neutral events, as I call them, such as war, civil unrest, natural catastrophes, etc. The contract will apportion the risk to one of the parties. So it's very, very balanced. Okay, thanks, Suzanne. The Yellow Book, principally the difference between the red and the yellow, and it can be used for any different sort of project, although FIDIC says for electrical and or mechanical plant or building and engineering. So it's a fairly wide remit. The thing is, the principal difference here is that this is a design and build contract. So the contractor is responsible for designing and then constructing after the design's been approved, and the design must be in accordance with the employer's requirements, which are set out in the employer's requirements at the time for tender. The other principal difference is it is not remeasurable, it is a lump sum price. So the contractors, when tendering, will tender for the works as they see it from the employer's requirements. Again, there's an engineer appointed to administer the contract, and again, it's a very balanced risk allocation between the contractor and the employer. Now, the Silver Book was produced by FIDIC in response to a different type of client. And a client, for example, might be a group of investors that want to construct something and then want to start making money out of it. Now, this type of client is less bothered about the lowest price is going to pay, but more bothered about having a firm price and a firm delivery date for the project, hence turnkey. So we've got to recognize that, in order to achieve this, the risk profile is transferred very much from the employer to the contractor. So basically we're saying here, Mr. Contractor, I just want a building. It needs to perform to certain requirements. And very often these are requirements related to output or production. So let's say a power plant needs to achieve this amount of gigawatts of power per day, or however you measure these things, or a factory facility needs to produce 1 million rubber ducks a day. They're not really bothered what it looks like, so long as it fits on this bit of land and it's reaching those criteria. So it will cost these clients more, because obviously the contractor, accepting more of the allocated risk, will have to price for risks such as unforeseeable conditions, will not be allowed to claim extras for increases in the cost of labour and material, and there are many things that he wouldn't get paid for, so has to include that risk within his price. So the main thing is it provides a higher degree of certainty of the final price and time, and the contractor has the total responsibility for design and execution. Again, it's a lump sum price. There's should be very little employer involvement here. It literally is, this is what I want, give me a price. Yes, I'm accepting your price, build it and give me a shout when it's ready so I can accept the key. It's that type of thing. The employer doesn't even appoint an engineer to administer the contract, although he will or is permitted to employ an employer's representative who will make decisions, issue instructions, respond to things, etc. And the final bullet point, as I've already said, there is minimal risk allocated to the employer in the Silver Book. So it is a contract, it's a good illustration where FIDIC looks at what's happening in the industry and reacts. Sometimes it reacts fairly slowly. We've had, what I haven't mentioned is that most people in the world are still using FIDIC 1999 editions. Although the second edition to the Red, Yellow and Silver Books were published in 2017. But as an industry, we're still in that transition period. And I don't envisage really the 2017 editions being the go-to contracts. We'll still be using 1999 for another several years. When we transitioned from 87 to 99, that took about 10 years. And we still come across some projects with FIDIC 87 being used. Okay, thanks, Suzanne. Just a quick thing. Some consultants, some employers get a little bit confused, but you know, FIDIC gives some guidelines here, and they say when should the Silver Book not be used? So when we should be looking at other alternative forms of FIDIC contracts. So if the project involves considerable underground work, there's always going to be a high degree of risk when we don't know what's there. If the contractor doesn't have sufficient time during the tender period to scrutinise the employer's requirements. So the contractor, when tendering, needs to have a fair amount of confidence of what the risk is, what the employer is wanting to be included in the lump sum price. And you know, you can't do that sort of exercise in you know, a couple of weeks. It's a process, isn't it? Or if the employer intends to involve himself in the day-to-day management of the project. I have seen a few projects where, you know, we go for a Silver Book and then we've got somebody appointed within the employer's organisation, or maybe a consultant appointed to act as the employer's representative, and they have problems switching from the role of a contracts administrator, an engineer who is hands-on, into this role where you are a couple of steps back and you only have a certain amount of authority and what you can instruct the contractor to do, etc. So yeah, sometimes the consultants themselves get a little bit carried away and think they are acting as they would do under a more traditional form of contract. Thanks, Suzanne.
One more.
Oh yes, and there's one more point there. If the employer wants the payments to be determined by another party, so typically if the employer wants to employ a cost consultant or someone to determine the payment, the agreement of claims of the final account, etc., should be strictly between the contractor and the employer. Obviously, the employer may need some help from somebody in the industry, but it's the employer that has the final decision. Thank you. Oh, and there's one more. And I can't actually see what that one says, so could you help me out, Suzanne?
Yeah, the employer is not willing to pay the contractor for bearing a high allocation of risk.
Yeah. So yeah, this if you are a developer or a client that wants a more economical price, you've got to recognise that the silver book is not the one for you. It will cost you money for the contractor to accept this additional risk. Thank you. We got the gold book very quickly. We don't get it used too much, but very quickly. This is for the sort of client, again, similar to how I described the silver book, but as well as designing the facility, building the facility, the gold book is intended for operation as well. So typically the contractor will design it, build it, and then operate it for a period of maybe 20 years. So this could apply to, tends to be things like power plants. In the Middle East, we have a lot of district cooling plants that provide cooled water for the air conditioning to a whole development. There are lots and lots of things like this, but the contract is sort of split into two distinct halves. And we've got your traditional design and build at the front end, and then there are a lot of conditions which are related to the operation part of the contract. Again, rather than I said it was similar to the silver book because it's sort of a turnkey, but we don't hand it to the employer. We say, okay, now we can start operating it on your behalf. But it is, again, the employer's representative rather than an engineer that administers the contract. And there is a reasonably balanced risk allocation. So the risk profile has changed from high with the silver book to less high with the gold book. And of course, the red and yellow, a little bit less than that. Thank you. Very briefly, to go with the red book, there is also a red book subcontract, and this is designed to be back to back. So the obligations of between the employer and the contractor, then in the subcontract, become the obligations between the contractor and the subcontractor for the subcontract work. So these are designed to work in harmony. We've only got from FIDIC at the moment the first edition, which is compatible with the 99 red book. No doubt FIDIC are working on one that's compatible with the 2017 edition. So it's simply a back-to-back thing. So if you are working on a red book and you want your subcontractors to have the same risk profile as you do with regard to the subcontract works, this is the one to go to. FIDIC also recognise that there is, the contracts that we've talked about so far are fairly typical for most of us that have been involved in the industry, but there are certain circumstances where we don't need a big contract. We can get away with something that's shorter and more simple. So the Green Book is a simple form of contract. It's less hefty, it has less clauses, it has a lot less words, and it's really designed by FIDIC for use of either uncomplicated work or of a low value, or simple or repetitive work where there's not a lot of things that can go wrong, of a higher value. So it's typical for this. The contractor constructs the work in accordance with the design by the employer, although again, like the red book, there could be some elements to be designed by the contractor. And in actual fact, I think I may have made a mistake. In the latest edition, 2021, I believe there are options to select for the Green Book. So it could be design and build, or it could be designed by the employer. I can't say that with any certainty. I need to check it out, so be aware of that. The options are also for the form of contract in that it could be a remeasurable, it could be a lump sum price, or it could be cost reimbursable. I remember being at a FIDIC conference some years ago, and FIDIC typically, if it's a regional conference, they will ask local people to speak about how the contracts are being used and applied in their particular region. And I remember one gentleman stood up and they'd had a disaster, let's say an earthquake or whatever it was, tsunami or whatever in his country. And he was working for the government, and they awarded lots and lots of contracts on the Green Book because it was easy to enter into contracts with contractors that had to start to clear away the rubble, construct temporary housing, etc., etc. And he said it worked very, very well because it was low value work, it was easy work, and I believe they did it straight away on a cost reimbursable business. So the contractors got paid for what it cost them, plus obviously a profit. We can have a contractor's representative in 1999 or the engineer in 2001 to administer the contract. And so let me see if I can get rid of this menu bar. Nope.
It's just
Nope.
balanced risk allocation at the bottom there again.
Okay, well, it's a balanced risk allocation then. So, oh, got rid of it. No, and it's,
Well done.
and it's come back in. Now I've got rid of the presentation. Oh, goodness me. My kids call me technically challenged. I think that's the word for old people and technology, isn't it? Right. Okay. Moving
You're
on.
right. You got
Yeah,
it.
yeah, we're good.
Okay, next one.
Yeah, please. Right. I mentioned, I alluded to it previously, but we do have what's known as the White Book, which is a client consultant service agreement. Again, it's pretty simple. It can be used across the board for consultancy services, so for design, contracts administration, cost control, project management, etc., etc. The main thing here is that the clauses, the standard provisions, are pretty simple. There are only 8 of them. And of course, the skill of writing this form of contract is actually writing out the schedules so that both parties, the employer and the consultant, know exactly what they've been appointed to do, and the volume of work and the quality of work, the extent of the work, etc. And that goes to programming, for payment, etc., etc. So there's a lot of work to be done in the schedules of making sure that they truly reflect what is required and what's being offered. And well, as I've said in the last bullet point, it requires detailed and precise scopes of services and deliverables. Thank you, Suzanne. And then we've got sort of speciality contracts. So this is a fairly recent addition for FIDIC, but it does illustrate the fact that they've got their eye on what's happening in the industry, and they particularly look at disputes. And when disputes are happening, and they are, and many cases there are the top 10 or the top 5 of reasons that disputes in the industry occur. They look at things and then they tweak things. There's a lot of tweaking gone on between 1999 and 2017 to encourage, for example, claims to be submitted to a better standard and responses to claims to have some recourse if the engineer doesn't do his job in the response. But this is a good example. Dredging and tunneling works, they've got their own, it's a speciality industry, but they've now got their own form of contracts to deal with the risks, the type of thing that would be encountered in this type of works. Thanks, Suzanne. So what should we think about when we're selecting our contract? If we are typically a consultant and we are advising the client as to which form of FIDIC to go for, these are things that we need to discuss with them and explain why one form of contract should be better than another. If we are a developer or an employer, we should have our eyes on this ourselves if we know our way around the industry. Otherwise, we'll need to rely on our consultants for advice. But my experience is that consultants will always go red book, red book, red book, red book. Why? Well, because it's the one that they're familiar with. Maybe they don't even know that there's this whole suite of contracts out there. And then they decide that the red book, we don't want this clause, we want this clause changing, we don't want a remeasurable contract, we want to change it to a lump sum. So it might have been more sensible to go for, we want to put less risk on the employer and more risk on the contractor. So it might be more sensible to go for a silver book, for example, or a green book or whatever. So things we need to think about are, what's the value of the project? If it's a mega project, well, we need a very robust form of contract. The same if it's a complex project where there are likely to be challenges, changes, variations, claims, etc. Who's going to have the design responsibility? Is it going to fall on the employer, or are we asking the contractor to design as well? Are we looking at certainty of cost, typically the silver book, or the lowest cost, maybe the red or the yellow? Who has day-to-day control? What's the involvement of the employer? Do we want to employ an engineer to look after our part of the bargain, to look after our interests, should I say? Or are we happy to say to the contractor, you're a good contractor, this is what I want, give me a shout when it's done? Or and then finally, do we want operation and maintenance on completion, or are we happy to take it from the contractor and become responsible for all of that sort of stuff ourselves? Thanks, Suzanne. So there's a little sort of flow chart here, which FIDIC have finally produced for people like me to steal and share with you. So if we start in the top left and follow the thought process down, is it a straightforward project? Well, yes, probably we should go with the green book then. If the answer to that is no, we have to then decide, are we going to go with the design provided by the employer? In that case, it will be the red book and the red book subcontract, where that's a decision to be made by the contractor, not the employer. If we are not, if the employer is not designing, we can look at the yellow book or the gold book or the silver book. So we've got other considerations on the design and build. So if we want maintenance to be included, well, the answer is going to be the gold book. If we don't want maintenance to be included, the answer is going to be the yellow book. And then, of course, do we want a fixed price lump sum, little involvement, no major unforeseen risks? And the natural one there is the form of contract that's been designed for that sort of employer, which will be the silver book. So that's basically the decision-making process. Why do, when it looks so simple, why do we get it wrong so much? And why do we see totally unsuitable forms of contract being used on so many projects? And my experience is that it's the engineers or the people advising on the form of contract to be used and any amendments to them don't really understand contracts, because they are designers generally, rather than people like us, maybe, who are contract specialists. Anyway, what's in a typical form of contract when you pay your money and you buy your form of contract from FIDIC? Well, this 20 or 21 clauses, 140 sub-clauses in the 99 edition, and quite a few more in the 2017. We have an appendix, and this is in the book that you buy. Let me show you one. You buy this from FIDIC, and this is what you get for your money. There's an appendix in there, which would include the conditions of dispute adjudication, something that's very important to FIDIC, and procedural rules for the DAB. Thanks, Suzanne. There's instructions and guidance for the preparation of the particular conditions, and it will give you notes for the preparation of the tender documents, notes and guidance on several clauses, suggestions for changes to wording for certain clauses, because a lot of people don't want it this way, they want it another way, and there are clauses that are changed quite frequently. So FIDIC have gone the extra mile and said, well, if you want it this way, here's a sample wording which you could include in the particular conditions. And also maybe sometimes we need additional clauses, and FIDIC have provided suggestions and the wording if we do decide we want to change the standard conditions. they are also very, very helpful in that they give templates or forms for parent company guarantee, tender security, performance security, advance payment guarantee, retention guarantee. Come on, Suzanne, you're not keeping up.
Another one, sorry.
Payment guarantees by the employer.
Is there more?
Yeah.
Okay.
Letter of tender, appendix to tender, or what's now changed to, in 2017, changed to the contract data, the contract agreement, and the dispute adjudication agreement. So what it comes down to is that FIDIC, the contracts provided by FIDIC comprise a comprehensive suite of documents that may be used harmoniously from tender to execution. So when you do buy this, you have your particular conditions, you have the guidance, you have the alternative clauses wording, and you've got all these standard forms and templates, so you can manage your project from a contractual basis from A to Z. And I think, Suzanne, let's have a little, there we go. That brings me to the end of my presentation. So if we'd like to open it up for not only questions, but please, you know, I like to invite people to share their experiences. Have you had problems with FIDIC? Do you like FIDIC? Are you using it on your project? And please share your experiences.
Do we have people out there that are using FIDIC? I'm sure we do.
Hi, good morning. Leo O'Neill here from HML in Estonia. Thank you for your presentation. I suppose from the accent, I'm an Irishman, but living in Estonia. So very familiar with NEC and JCT, as you mentioned, and the CIS and FIDIC as well. We find here in Estonia that it's not as commonly used as there is, but my question is adjudicators. You mentioned there about adjudication. How does, for example, in this region, they're struggling to even find adjudicators for FIDIC. How are they audited, or how does a company or a person become an adjudicator with FIDIC?
Okay. Just for everyone else's, that's a good question, and thank you. Just for everyone else's benefit, FIDIC includes a standard clause which allows for the appointment of a dispute adjudication board. In 2017, the title has been changed to, excuse me, a dispute avoidance and adjudication board. There is an emphasis on getting what I like to call the three wise men, but now I have to call the three wise persons, to be involved in the project and instantly be able to give the parties advice to head off potential disputes. But then if a dispute does occur, they are in a position, their obligation is to come up with a balanced, fair and reasonable decision within 84 days of referral. Now, compare that to arbitration, where we're still paying lawyers millions of dollars in 3 years' time and we still don't have an answer. That is a very, very good thing. So how do you, I think the question was, how do you become an adjudicator? That's a question that I asked myself when I first heard about DABs. And the first thing is to get training as an adjudicator. Presuming that we've got the requisite skills, experience and qualifications in the construction industry, you also need to gain experience, training and skills on the whole adjudication process. So what makes a good adjudicator? How do you maintain impartiality? How do you demonstrate your impartiality to the parties? Once you have reached a certain level of expertise, you can apply to FIDIC to go on their, I think it's called their panel of experts. And this is if you are looking to appoint an adjudicator or a member of a DAB, you can go to FIDIC and you can look at the people that are on that, I think it's called the President's List. And you can look for people that have the right sort of experience, maybe in the region of the project, so they understand what life is like in Estonia. on a pipeline, if that's what you're building, or a power plant, and choose a couple of people that would be suitable for nomination as your DAB member. Because the way it works is both parties nominate a member, but the other party can look at that and say, look, this guy Andy Hewitt, he seems to know what he's doing, but he's never worked in Estonia. Maybe he doesn't understand the culture. Maybe we need to look for somebody with similar experience in the industry, but has worked in this part of the world previously. So you've got to then look for another one. So I hope that answers your question, and thank you for it.
Those, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Anyone else have any questions or comments?
This is always worrying, Suzanne. I never know whether I've done an absolutely perfect presentation and everybody understands it, or nobody understands anything, but they're too shy to tell me about it.
Well, even I understood it.
Oh, Kevin Ellis has a question from one of my colleagues. Go ahead, Kevin.
I think you've put yourself on mute.
Hi, Andy. What is FIDIC doing to try and expand the use of the FIDIC contracts in areas where currently they're not maybe so prevalent?
That's a good question, Kevin, and one I don't know the answer to. I'm not involved in FIDIC. I'm not part of the organisation, except to say that I am a certified trainer with FIDIC. You know, I don't get involved in the decision-making process. I'm not on any of their panels. I should add that a lot of the administration, whilst there is a core of paid salaried employees at FIDIC, a lot of the work, the actual drafting of the contracts, a lot of the training is done by volunteers in a similar way that, you know, I'm here today doing CPD pro bono. There's a lot of people out in the industry that contribute to FIDIC in one way or another. I think they don't need to do much selling these days, Kevin, because they are pretty much accepted internationally. As I said, countries that don't have their own form of, have not developed their own form of contracts, they're looking for a good form of construction contract. There's one ready-made that they can use. I should also add that the contracts are published in several different languages as well. Plus the World Banks, the generally development banks who lend money to countries with a small GDP will insist that if they're lending the money to fund a road project or a dam or a hydro project, it will need to be under a FIDIC form of contract. So they are insisting that it is a robust form of contract, and FIDIC is their go-to place. So I don't think it needs a lot of selling, actually, and promoting. I think it's the industry has adopted FIDIC in many parts of the world, and I personally, I think that's a good thing.
Anyone else?
I have one more question. It helps. Obviously, as I said earlier, like FIDIC is still quite new to this region. We're used to it more with multinationals coming in here, like Microsoft and so on, and they use it predominantly. So that's how we're familiar with it. What we have seen happening here, and maybe you can give comment on it, local solicitors, law firms take it and then start, I would say, putting their own clauses into it. Forget scrubbing the clauses that are in there and go, no. We're not agreeing to that, and put that more or less taking the FIDIC template, and it then becomes their own version. How does that become, how to say, from FIDIC's perspective, how do they, or how do you look at that in the sense of contractually binding, that if all they're using is the heading and maybe 10 clauses out of the whole 140 plus, because they've completely rewritten it?
Yeah, it is something that I've seen happen many times, and you know, this is. Forgive me if we've got any lawyers out there, but you know, the lawyers not understanding construction, and all they're looking at is a clause that protects their client, i.e. the employer, and they don't really understand that construction is is quite challenging and is a lot different to, let's say, a factory that's producing rubber ducks. You know, we've got ground to deal with, we've got weather conditions to deal with, we've got many different entities involved on a construction project. So the lawyers can often make a real mishmash of what started off as a robust and fair form of contract. But we can see this in any form of contract. You know, my friends in Ireland, my friends in the UK say that, you know, we've got the, I can't remember the standard forms in Ireland, forgive me, but, you know, the JCT, the NEC, we still have the lawyers or the employers changing those conditions. So I think that's just a natural thing. But it's a very good question, and this is one that's debated quite often by FIDIC at the conferences, is that when does it stop being a contract that should have FIDIC's name on the front, because the principles and the conditions have been changed so much? And it's something that FIDIC sought to address. They've published what they call the golden principles, and there are certain things that must be complied with in order for it to be regarded as a FIDIC contract. And I can't think what they are, but it's a few years since I read it, but that's very good guidance. The problem is, what does FIDIC do to enforce that? And the answer is they can't do anything. You know, if you've got a client in Estonia, his lawyers change the FIDIC clauses so they are unrecognizable as FIDIC, but it still says FIDIC Red Book on the front. What can FIDIC do about that? And really, they can't, without, I guess, without very expensive legal battles. And, you know, they're not it's basically a charitable, a non-profit making organization. Or you just try to educate people, and I think they try to educate people rather than, certainly I've never heard of any form of action taken against somebody who's taken what is one thing and changed it to something different. It's like, you know, it's like going out and buying a BMW with an M series engine and putting a 1600 diesel engine in it. It's not the same, is it? Anyway, I hope that helps.
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah, it does help in the sense of, yeah, as I assume, there's very little to do with it, and it's just about trying to make sure that they keep to those requirements. So thank you.
I think one of the things is, and for anybody, and I'm preaching to the converted here, because you all got up at stupid o'clock this morning to listen to me talk to you for an hour, but a lot of it is to do with education. One of the things that is the biggest reason for disputes is the fact that the parties don't understand their contractual obligations and or understand them but don't perform them. And you know, in my experience, people just do not understand things. You know, they're underqualified, they're underexperienced, and they don't do what you guys are doing and keep up with their continual professional development. So if we can educate these employers, if we can educate these lawyers to say, yep, you know all about the law, but you know nothing about construction, this is not a sensible thing to do. So, sorry, I'm on my soapbox again. It's all gone quiet.
Yeah, anyone else got any comments, questions for Andy whilst you have the chance? Fount of all knowledge.
Okay, well, I think that's it then. And thank you very much for the Estonia I don't know, is the Estonia contingent or the Irish contingent?
It's the Irish-English contingency in Estonia. So Kevin Ellis and myself both work in the same company in Estonia. But see, Kevin has his hand up again there for a question.
It does. And Tony as well. We'll come back to you in a minute, Tony.
Okay.
And it was really just when you're working outside of, you know, we work outside of the UK, and we work in lots of jurisdictions, probably 10 or 15 across sort of the European, Northern Africa. For younger people to get experience in FIDIC contract, could you give any thoughts as to how what would be a good sort of strategy for people to get some hands-on experience?
Yeah. Well, I just may correct an impression. I've only just returned to the UK after working for 30 years in Africa and the Middle East. So the UK is less familiar to me than the Middle East, for example. So, but training, personal training, company training is something that I think we all need to do to maintain our professionalism and to enhance our career. FIDIC themselves do quite a lot of training. There are other training providers, such as Claims Class, that I do have an interest in, where you can get training on various aspects of FIDIC. And, it's not only Claims Class, but do a web search and find out who is providing training. For example, not to plug Claims Class again, but Claims Class actually do self-study courses, e-courses, so you study in your own time, do online courses where you'll sign in for an hour or an hour and a half for once a week for 6 weeks to receive this sort of tutorial. So training is out there. Go out and look for it. But maybe your first point is go to FIDIC and see what they're offering.
Tony, do you have a question?
I was just going to mention the fact that many years ago, Liverpool Council had their amendments to the JCT 63. And when the JCT 80 came out, they carried on with the amendments to the JCT 63. And I couldn't figure out why, because I used to work there. And I was told by the legal department that their lawyers knew the JCT 63 with the Liverpool amendments inside out, and most of the local contractors did, and they didn't want to change to something they didn't know about. I just throw that in. And I'm also curious. I've never heard before of the Institute of Construction Claims Practitioners. While you're there, I see you're actually a member of that, or fellow. Andy, can you tell us a bit about it?
Yeah, well, thank you very much for the in there. But your example, and thanks for sharing this, with the Liverpool Council not wanting to change because everybody knew it. None of us like change, do we? We're all quite happy. I learned FIDIC 1987 clauses inside out, upside down and backwards because I was working as a claims guy in those days. And then we got FIDIC 99. I took one look at it and thought, bloody hell, this is complicated. I'm going to have to learn everything again. Of course, you don't have to learn the principles again because they're transferable from contract to contract. But yeah, it is a learning curve. But I ask people, are you still driving around in a 1999 car, or would you prefer to drive around in a 2017 model car? And I think the answer is fairly obvious. We've got all sorts of new technology, that new that people like me don't understand it. I can't even change the clock when it comes around to March and April on my modern car. But my classic 1994 car, I just twist a button. It's great, But you take my point. Nobody likes change, but we've got to push ourselves. And people like ourselves, professionals, have got to sometimes champion the cause for change. So go on to your second question, which gives me the opportunity to do a little bit more of a commercial break. The Institute of Construction Claims Practitioners is very, very like the QSI in that it is a small organisation for professionals, an organisation that is small enough to be friendly and small enough to care about its members, and not like the bigger organisations that we all might also be members of, that are more interested in paying high salaries to their executives than they are about providing a great service to their members, who they charge quite a lot in their yearly subscriptions. Am I sounding cynical? But the ICCP is there for people who are specialists in claims and have gained that a certain knowledge, a certain skill, etc. Like the QSI, it can be joined at various different levels. There are no entrance exam. It is based on purely on existing experience and qualifications, etc. But it's there to promote what is good about what a good claim looks like, what it smells like, feels like, how to put it together, good practice, and to promote this and to train and educate people internationally. Again, it's an international organization, to show people what good looks like. Claims a little bit different. If you're a quantity surveyor, generally you've gone to university, you've got a degree in quantity surveying, you then start off as an assistant working on projects, and you gain your experience to add to your qualifications. Well, you don't go to university to become a claims practitioner. We all become claims practitioners after being in another career. In my case, it was quantity surveying, commercial management, contracts management, project management, and then I became a claims guy. That's how most people become claims managers, practitioners, or whatever. So membership is dictated by existing experience, and it is like the QSI that we are there, and I am involved in the management and administration of ICCP to help our members, and we do a lot of training webinars, a lot of information sharing. We have a knowledge base. There's all sorts of things going. If you're interested, I would request that you have a look at the ICCP Institute of Construction Claims Practitioners website. And I should add as well, you know, Suzanne and I have known each other for many, many years. It's not a rival organisation. We see a lot of ICCP members would also be members of QSI, and probably vice versa.
Yeah,
We do work together and have done. And, you know, unlike other institutes, QSI will work to help our members, and we will work to help QSI members. There's no rivalry there. It's what can we say? It's teamwork, really, to bring the benefit to our members. So, yeah, have a look if you're involved in claims.
I actually have the thing on another screen over here. The problem I've got is that I happen to have been dragged into. Somebody offered me a job. Yeah, fine. And when I got in there, I found that the majority of their problems were they were having to, instead of simple variations, they're having to be major claims. And I'm just snowed under with claims. And I'm just thinking of what I can do about it, that's all.
Well, if you need to deal with claims, have a look at the ICCP. And, you know, if you don't want to become a member, we do a lot of CPD events that are open not only to, there's a lot of members only ones, but there's a lot of CPD talks such as this one that are open to anybody to join in and get the benefit from. I mean, it's there to try and attract people to join up and for members, but have a look. And if you need help, try and find a consultant to help you if you're snowed under.
Hey, thanks very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Andy. That's been very interesting, and thank you to those of you who've contributed to the discussion there, also equally interesting. If you want CPD certificates for this session, please either pop it in the chat quickly now or send me an email. Happy to provide those. Thank you for joining this Thursday Club CPD event. Our next one will be on the 5th of January, I believe it is, when we'll be talking about the new Building Safety Act. And then the following one in December will be procurement, but we'll keep you informed of the details for those as we go along. So thank you all very much. Oh, actually, I do just have one more question, if you can let me know, again, via chat, via an email, whatever. Have you enjoyed this session? Would you like a follow-on? And if you'd like a follow-on, is there anything specific that you would like Andy to cover for you? I'm sure you don't mind doing that, Andy, do you?
Of course not. There is actually, just to remind you, Suzanne, there's one last slide with the ICCP contact details, website, etc. Maybe I can't actually see because my slides are covered in cameras. Oh, there we go.
There we go.
Yeah,
Can you
so
see that?
anybody that's interested, there are the contract details, etc. And yes, I'd be more than happy to come back and talk to my friends at the QSA again.
Good. We love having you. Thank you, Andy. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Okay. Thank you very much, everyone.
All right. Bye-bye. Take care.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. If anyone's not had time to take these details down, just email me. I can let you know. Thank you. Bye-bye.